August 11th, 2007, there were 3,000 Californians gathered in 8 different sites all across California. So in these 8 different cities, each one had a site where about 300 to 500 people all got together into a room, a big room. So at Riverside, it was actually in the gym at UCR, for example. And they had, in each of these rooms, they had, let's see, let me just go down to here. What they did was they gathered and had people sit at tables, small group tables of 8 to 10 to 12 other citizens. America Speaks distributed both surveys both before and after the sessions. So we have both pre-treatment and post-treatment data, if you will, if you're thinking experimentally. And then people were assigned to go to their small group tables to discuss healthcare policy. So this was what we were saying, is that they were asked, America Speaks had invited all these people to get together to discuss healthcare policy in California and how to reform healthcare. Yep.
Your pre and post surveys, you were able to follow individuals or just the general?
The individuals. So we have individuals pre-test and post-test survey. So as I mentioned, America Speaks they're not social scientists, and so they did assign people to tables, and they had a systematic procedure, and we know exactly what that procedure was. And they assigned people to tables the way you would at like a wedding. But they had staff there that made sure everybody went to their table assignment. And it turned out in these top 4 cities, Riverside, Sacramento, Eureka, and San Luis Obispo, that they had very good staffing there. And at all 4 of those sites, we know, based on how we know because we track people through their surveys, that literally almost every single person went to their table assignment. So in these cities, you had between 1 and 3 people out of 300 to 500 people that went to the wrong table. And so people were assigned seats, they went to their assigned seats. But America Speaks did not use random assignment. But it turned out that the assignment procedure that they used was identical to a random assignment procedure, just by chance, just by luck. And I can talk more about that later, but I'm just going to assert that for now, and then on the next slide show a proof of that, and then go on. Yes?
How were the 3,000 Californians selected?
They used, for this study, they used random digit dialing and invited people from those 4 areas. So what America Speaks does is they actually don't care about the sort of social scientific things that we would care about whether the sample of people who attended these sessions was representative of the state. But what they do care very much about is that you get as diverse of a cross-section of the state as you can get at these sessions. They don't want just, I actually talked to them recently and they said at these sessions we don't want like all the Tea Partiers to come in and flood. And so they tried very hard to get a good cross-section. And in this case, they did that through random digit dialing.
Well, is there any way is there any way to control for people who are just likely to be outspoken and want to participate in something like this? Meaning, the people who are less outspoken may have been excluded?
So whenever you do an experiment like this, it's certain that the people who attended these sessions are the people that like to do these kinds of things. So they're not going to possibly be representative. And so what we can, so we can't say that the results I'm going to present to you today is somehow representative of all citizens in California. But what we do is we have, of the people who came to these sessions, we randomly assign them to different conditions. And so what we can say is what's called a sample average treatment effect, sample treatment effects, which say for the types of people that come to this kind of a session, we can say what's the effect of deliberation for them. So that's the best we can do. Yep.
And the participants were not paid?
They were not paid. They got a breakfast. But they did it just out of their own interest. It's amazing what these guys do. I mean, 3,000 people. Show me a social scientist that can do something on that scale. Okay. But I agree. So I wouldn't try to generalize this to some sort of larger population. But the effects I'm going to talk about are of interest. It's sort of like when psychologists do experiments on college undergrads, that they say that if you find an effect, college undergrads are people, right? And so if you find an effect, it's kind of interesting that that you're sort of learning something about human cognition because undergrads are people, and we're sort of saying the same thing. So as I'm going to show, again, on the next slide, I'm just going to quickly assert that this assignment was just like random. And because it was just like random, we're able to actually identify the causal effect of disagreement in an experimental sense. So you could think of, if you want to think experimentally, there's people were essentially assigned to different levels of disagreement randomly, and so disagreement is sort of like the treatment. So if your level of disagreement is sort of like your dose of a drug, and people were assigned to different doses of disagreement. And because this was very much experimental, we can actually make statements about the causal effect of disagreement across the table. And so I'm not going to get bogged down. The paper goes into length both for theoretical reasons and a long list of empirical reasons. We can assert that even though they didn't use a random number generator to assign people to tables, it turns out empirically the distribution of the things that we care about in the study is quite literally random. So for example, if you look at things that we care about, that I'll talk about later in the study, the mean ideology across the tables is exactly distributed normally, the way you would expect if there was random assignment. And likewise, by the measure that I'm going to describe in a minute, of the measure of disagreement at every table, it's almost exactly, and in fact it's statistically indistinguishable from a random normal distribution. And so the paper goes into greater length about all the kinds of tests that we do to prove the randomness, but I'm just going to assert it now and move on. But because of that, we're able to make causal statements of the effect of disagreement across tables. And so in an experiment, if you do experiments, if you have a perfect experiment where there was perfect randomization and perfect compliance, like we had at these 4 studies, usually then you think, well, now my job is done because there's no statistical problems left. If you have good randomization and full compliance, then you really just have to do like a t-test or an ANOVA estimation to be able to say whether there's a difference between the treatment and control conditions. But it turns out that just because we had random assignment and full compliance, there was a strong and bad methodological wrinkle that we need to deal with in order to be able to really make statements about the size of the effect. And that wrinkle is this, that it turns out what we care about is how much disagreement there was at every table, but we don't have a direct measure of the level of disagreement at every table. Instead, what we do is we construct an estimate of disagreement based on items in the pretest survey. Okay, and I'm going to explain that in just a second. But as a result, because we didn't have like a tape recorder measuring the decibel level at every table or any kind of direct measure of disagreement, we have to make an inference about the level of disagreement. And as a consequence, the treatment that we care about, the level of disagreement, is measured with error. Okay, so we need to propose a method for estimating the effect of a stochastic treatment in an experiment. Get my notes to catch up here. So to give a sense of what, to show you what I mean by this, the first thing I'll do is say, well, what would we have liked to have seen if we could observe the true level of disagreement? So what we would like to have observed for our own theoretical reasons would be if you could imagine seeing everybody's ideology, okay? And so you could imagine, even through random assignment, you'll have some tables where a bunch of liberals are all seated together, right? And so at that table, there would be very low disagreement. Another table might have very strong liberals and strong conservatives seated